Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching News Night on DD India, your primetime destination for news and bespoke analysis. It's good to see you again. All right, on the show tonight, a deep dive into the just concluded visit to India by US Foreign Minister Antony Blinken. Expectedly, Afghanistan, the Indo-Pacific and COVID-19 pandemic topped the agenda of Blinken's talks with External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar. Minister Jaishankar says India's ties with the US have entered a new era. For his part, Blinken says the US is in alignment with India on Afghanistan. Blinken also says Taliban violence against the Afghan people is quote-unquote deeply troubling and not a good sign for the future of the country. Now this on a day when Taliban made a dash for the Chinese city of Tianjin, where Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi hosted Taliban political chief Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar for talks. So, where do India and the US go from here? What's at stake for India and the world in Afghanistan? And why is the Quad, comprising the four like-minded democracies of India, the US, Australia and Japan, making China anxious? We get you a 360-degree perspective with the help of our guests joining us from the India and the US. Plus, news and updates from India and the world. All that and much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. US Foreign Minister Antony Blinken meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi. PM welcomes US President Biden's strong commitment to strengthen India-US strategic partnership. Blinken also holds talks with External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar and discusses COVID, Indo-Pacific, climate change and Afghanistan. PM interacts with representatives of religious and social organizations on COVID-19, exhorts leaders to work with government to spread awareness about vaccines and tackle vaccine hesitancy, says help provided during the pandemic is a shining example of Ek Bharat, Ek Nisht Prayas. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh attends the SCO Defense Ministers meeting in Dushanbe, says terrorism is the most serious threat to international peace and security, and any act of terror and support of such acts is a crime against humanity. Reaffirms India's resolve to fight terror in all its forms and manifestations. Cabinet clears the Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation Bill 2021. Depositors in stressed banks to get insurance money within 90 days of moratorium. New rule applicable to all commercial banks and branches of foreign banks operating in India. Proceedings of Parliament stall amid opposition uproar. Lok Sabha disrupted in the midst of ruckus after completion of Question Hour. Insolvency and Bankruptcy Bill passed in the Lok Sabha. The Rajya Sabha passes Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Amendment Bill 2021. Indian athletes keep the ball rolling at Tokyo Olympics. Boxer Pooja Rani enters quarters. Archer Deepika Kumari in third round. Boxing heavyweight MC Mary Kom and star shuttler PV Sindhu will be live in action on Thursday. Right, let me dive straight into our cover story. Now, US Foreign Minister Antony Blinken's India visit covered various sectors of cooperation, including response to COVID-19 pandemic, defense and security, trade, investment, and addressing climate change. Now, Blinken met PM Narendra Modi and Minister Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. But the focus of talks revolved around Afghan situation, the Indo-Pacific, and the Quad. Take a look.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had a power pack today in New Delhi, with several engagements focusing on a variety of issues. He called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, The Prime Minister in a tweet said, and I quote, "Good to meet US Secretary of State Secretary Blinken today. I welcome President Biden's strong commitment to strengthen the India-US strategic partnership, which is anchored in our shared democratic values and is a force for global good." Blinken had several engagements focusing on a variety of issues. Also held talks with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and discussed COVID, Indo-Pacific, climate change and Afghanistan. Addressing a joint press conference, the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said that the world wishes to see an independent, sovereign, democratic and stable Afghanistan. India stressed that the peace negotiations have to be taken seriously by all the parties. Afghanistan must neither be home to terrorism nor a source of refugees.
Regarding Afghanistan, it is essential that peace negotiations are taken seriously by all parties. The world wishes to see an independent, sovereign, democratic and stable Afghanistan, at peace with itself and with its neighbors. But its independence and sovereignty will only be ensured if it is free from malign influences. Similarly, unilateral imposition of will by any party will obviously not be democratic and can never lead to stability. The gains to Afghan civil society, especially on the rights of women, minorities, and on social freedoms, over the last 2 decades are self-evident. We must collectively work to preserve them. Afghanistan must neither be home to terrorism nor a source of refugees.
Blinken also stressed that if the Taliban wants recognition in the world, they will have to respect human rights. He said that taking over the country by force and abusing the rights of the people is not the right path to achieve this.
The Taliban says that it seeks international recognition, that it wants international support for Afghanistan. Presumably it wants its leaders to be able to travel freely in the world, sanctions lifted, etc. Well, the taking over the country by force and abusing the rights of its people is not the path to achieve those objectives.
Focusing on the Indo-Pacific region, Jaishankar also said that the Indo-Pacific presents a different set of challenges to stability, growth and prosperity. Adding to this, Antony Blinken also highlighted that the partnership will be critical in delivering stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond.
The Indo-Pacific presents a different set of challenges to stability, growth and prosperity. Under the aegis of the Quad framework, we are engaged on maritime security, HADR, counter-terrorism, connectivity and infrastructure, cyber and digital concerns, COVID-19 response, climate action, education, and resilient and reliable supply chains. Our ability to work more closely, bilaterally, in the Quad and elsewhere benefits the international community as a whole.
President Biden feels a deep personal commitment to making our friendship with India as strong and as effective as it can be. We believe this partnership will be critical for delivering stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, and for showing the world how democracies can deliver for their people. And we believe that there's a good deal that we can accomplish together on so many fronts, including in the near term.
Thanking India for its support to the US during the early days of the COVID in the United States, Blinken announced that the US government will send an additional $25 million support for vaccination efforts across India. Earlier in the day, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken also met the NSA Ajit Doval, where strategic issues of importance in security, defense, economic and technology-related sectors were discussed.
Though the entire gamut of the bilateral relationship was discussed, but Afghanistan was in key focus in the conversations today, with the External Affairs Minister pointing out and insisting that unilateral imposition will not lead to stability in Afghanistan. With cameraman S. Jaishankar, Amritpal Singh, DD India.
All right, time now for our In Focus segment, in which we are discussing about India-US partnership, a force for global good. And joining me are 3 very special guests: Ambassador Prabhu Dayal and strategic expert Sushant Sareen from India, and Professor W.P.S. Sidhu from the US. A quick word about my guest. Ambassador Dayal is a former Indian envoy to Morocco and Kuwait. He was a consul general in New York and is also an accomplished author. Now, Mr. Sareen is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. It's a privately held think tank headquartered in New Delhi. His expertise, Pakistan and terrorism. And Professor Sidhu is with the NYU School of Professional Studies, Center for Global Affairs, leading the United Nations Specialization. Gentlemen, welcome to News Night. Good to see you on DD India. Ambassador Dayal, if I can start with you, the optics and outcome from the India-US talks in New Delhi, your thoughts?
Well, leaving aside the optics, I think the content was very rich indeed, because both India and the United States are concerned about geopolitical challenges. And these challenges pertain mainly to Afghanistan and to the hegemonistic role which China is trying to play in the Indo-Pacific region. Of course, there was also a lot of talk, very meaningful, about cooperation in the context of combating the pandemic. But the thrust of the discussions, without doubt, was the terribly worrying situation now emerging in Afghanistan, whereby Pakistan is trying to use the Taliban to topple the government in Kabul and extend its outreach and its influence into Afghanistan and, in fact, make it a territory which is virtually under the control of Islamabad. How much it is able to do so remains to be seen. But again, the Chinese are stepping in with a very dubious role, because the Taliban has already made it very clear that the Chinese are very trustworthy allies for it. And therefore, this trio of the Taliban working with Pakistan and again working with China is tending to create a great deal of instability. And that is why the External Affairs Minister pointed out that neither should Afghanistan be a point where there is trouble, nor should be a source of refugees, which was a very pertinent statement. And he also said that Afghanistan should be free from malign influences. And where are those malign influences coming from? Of course, they are coming through Pakistan. So I think the strategic discussions focused on all these very, very relevant topics, and it was high time that India and the United States put their heads together in this regard.
Absolutely. Mr. Sareen, talking about Afghanistan now, but before I ask you the question, just quick recap of what the two ministers said in New Delhi this afternoon. Blinken says the US is in alignment with India on Afghanistan. He says the Taliban advance is quote unquote deeply troubling. And he says violence does not speak well of Taliban's intention. And last but not the least, Blinken says Taliban wants international recognition, including freedom to travel and lifting of sanctions. Now, for his part, Minister Jaishankar says India and the US hold similar views on Afghanistan. India favors a political settlement, and all sides should take peace talks seriously and rid Afghanistan of or insulate Afghanistan from malign influences. Mr. Sareen, the statement, remarks on Afghanistan, does it tick all the right boxes for you?
Yeah, the statements and all of that tick all the right boxes. But, the impression which I got was, one, that when it comes to Indo-Pacific, I think there's a far greater degree of agreement on virtually everything between India and the United States. When it comes to the western side, on the west of India, what is happening, and maybe I'm wrong, but what seems to be happening is that both India and the US desire the same end result. We are on the same page on what we want as an outcome in Afghanistan and what kind of an Afghanistan we want. Absolutely no difference on that. 100% we are on the same page. I think where the difference is coming is on what needs to be done to ensure that outcome. I suspect, because some of the statements which I heard today during the press conference, I suspect that there are some differences on what exactly needs to be done. This fits in, and this is something, Ramesh, we've been hearing for many years now,
Right.
Many American scholars often say that 95% of convergence east of India, but probably only 5% convergence. This is about some years back, 5% convergence west of India. Now, something Azhar Dayal said right now about the Chinese, and the Chinese have been completely backing the Taliban, notwithstanding the nonsense which the Pakistanis and the Chinese have been telling the world,
Right.
all those nice sounding phrases and statements which they've been giving about an Afghan-led solution and all of that. All of that is utter nonsense, because the Chinese have been selling the Taliban for months now and saying that this is a force of stability, something which has been made official when the Chinese foreign minister met the Taliban delegation today. Now, where I am coming from, I think that, this business which was there between India and the US, that we were in complete alignment east of India, but not so much on west of India. I think that does not wash down anymore. Because if the Chinese are coming west of India, and they seem to be coming in a big way, then I think the Indians and the Americans need to, have a greater degree of convergence, both on what needs to be done and how it is to be done, not just the end result. And that is where I see a bit of a disconnect.
Fair enough. Professor Sidhu, let's get a view from the US from you. Now, but before that, was it a coincidence that Blinken was in Delhi, Austin was in Hanoi, and the Taliban was in the Chinese city of Tianjin, and the Pakistani NSA and ISR chief were in Washington, D.C.?
And also to add to that list, Wendy Sherman was also in China. So,
Indeed.
just to put that into sort of broad context. And you're absolutely right. I think if you look at the optics, and, as well as the question that you asked right in the beginning, but also the substance of it, this has been an extremely significant visit. Because, as you know, this is only the first year of the Biden administration. And yet the high-level meetings, even at the head of state level, and even among the Secretary of State and the Foreign Minister, have been very significant. This, I believe, is the fourth time they've met, and we're only halfway through the year that we've gone. And this is very much looking at four clear areas. Number one, looking at the bilateral relationship, which is clearly growing from strength to strength. Second, regional, and there, as you heard, there is much more convergence that we're starting to see between the two sides than divergence. This is not to undermine that there aren't differences, but also the ability and the desire to want to address those differences in a very candid and substantial sort of way as well. And third, precisely as you noted, noting all the other sort of movements going on to and fro, that this is also in a much more global context that it's happening. So not only in the Indo-Pacific, which is really crucial and vital, but also at the multilateral level.
Sure.
The fact that the readouts talked about greater coordination in the UN Security Council and countering terrorism at the multilateral level is extremely, extremely important as well. So you're absolutely right to put it in that context, that India has now become a very significant player, a vital partnership, to use Secretary Blinken's word, for the United States, not just at the bilateral level, but also at the regional and the global level. And then, of course, the two elements, the other two elements which are important to point out, is also the combat, the battle against COVID-19 and climate change.
Fair enough. Ambassador Dayal, to take off on the point where Mr. Sareen left, do you also see more of a congruence between India and the US in the Indo-Pacific as opposed to Afghanistan, number one? And number two, your thoughts on the probability of a Quad Leaders Summit, an in-person summit later this year, Foreign Ministers Quad Summit, and also the India-US 2+2 dialogue to be held later this year as well?
Well, let me address all three issues, beginning with Afghanistan. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, as Mr. Sareen pointed out, while there's broad agreement between India and the United States, But the problem is that we are not able to completely synchronize our thinking on all issues. In particular, let me mention that there doesn't seem to be enough firmness on the part of the United States as far as Pakistan is concerned. You know, Pakistan is the root cause of the Afghan problem. And we have been trying to point out very clearly to the rest of the world that terrorism emanates from Pakistan and is hurting Afghanistan as it hurts us. But somehow this issue has not been taken so seriously by other countries, including, of course, our interlocutors in the United States. I hope that there is increasing seriousness devoted to the very negative role, the very malign role which Pakistan is playing. Secondly, to come to the Indo-Pacific.
Sure.
Of course, India and the United States both are concerned about Chinese expansionism. No country in the world is facing the brunt of this aggression as much as India has, because there has been a long standoff which our forces have been having with the Chinese. So we have seen this expansionism firsthand. Of course, this expansionism is manifesting itself in a variety of ways, and the Americans are equally concerned about it, as indeed they should be. Then we come to the Quad summit. You know, the Quad is becoming increasingly important as a forum for India and the United States to synchronize their thinking and the course of their activities. Of course, Mr. Blinken pointed out that the Quad is not going to have a military configuration, which indeed is the case. But then, if you are like-minded and you agree on a variety of geopolitical issues, there can be a lot of very close coordination. And I think the Quad summit will make this coordination even closer than it has already become. So I would attach a lot of importance to the forthcoming Quad summit whenever it takes place.
Right, fair point. I'm running out of time, so very quickly, please keep your answers, interventions short, Mr. Sareen and Professor Sidhu. Mr. Sareen, coming to you now, as you mentioned, the Taliban leaders were hosted by the Chinese foreign minister earlier today. The Pakistani NSA and ISI chief are in DC as we speak. And also Blinken hosted the Dalai Lama's representative in New Delhi. So what do you make of these signals that all sides sending out as we speak, number one? And number two, your thoughts and also the way forward in Afghanistan, given the fact that the US and India say that there should be an inclusive government, representative government in Kabul, and that Taliban should not be allowed to walk over in Afghanistan, so to speak.
Look, to come to your second question first, I think Ambassador Dayal has kind of highlighted what needs to be done. You really screws on the people who are actually invading Afghanistan. I don't think there is any easy way of putting it. What is happening in Afghanistan is an invasion from Pakistan, nothing less, nothing more. And it's not as though the Americans have suddenly woken up to this. The Americans have known this for the last 20 years, but the Americans were very quick to sanction a country, a superpower like Russia, become like, rather pusillanimous when it comes to actually turning the screws on the Pakistanis, except for stopping some aid and other stuff. They've never really turned the screws on the Pakistanis. So until and unless you're willing to do that, I think the game is more or less up. None of these over-the-horizon operations are going to work. And I suspect that that could be one point of divergence between India and the United States as far as Afghanistan is concerned. On the other stuff, I think, the equilibrium which existed a few years back in international relations has kind of got disturbed, both to the west of India as well as to the east of India. And many of these meetings which are now taking place are going to determine what that new equilibrium in the region and perhaps in the globe is going to be. So the Pakistani is going to America, the Chinese, the Secretary of State meeting the representative of the Dalai Lama, the Defense Secretary going to Vietnam. All of this, I think, is part of that new equilibrium, which has to be struck, because otherwise things are a little, not in balance right now.
Fair enough. I'll give you the last, Professor Sidhu. Would you like to draw a contrast between the meeting that took place in Anchorage, Alaska, between the Chinese and the Americans, and what happened in New Delhi this afternoon, number one. And number two, quickly, if you don't mind, the situation in the US as we speak, the US government and agencies have said that masks should be worn even indoors. So do you think, in hindsight, Biden may have shown undue haste in announcing what it did 60 days ago?
Both excellent questions. Well, I don't think you can draw a bigger contrast between the meeting in Anchorage and the one in New Delhi. Clearly, what you saw in New Delhi was not a love fest, but a very practical partnership where the two sides are coming together, as I mentioned earlier, not just for bilateral, but also regional and global issues as well. And we're very much setting the stage for the next few months. So, including, I would suspect, a bilateral, high-level, maybe even state-to-state meeting, if not a quad meeting, on the sidelines of the UN in September. So that's something, which is clearly going to come up on as well. I think on your question of COVID-19, it's a very pertinent one. But the parallel I would draw is, I think we're all underestimating the efficacy and the ability of this virus to mutate. It's like saying that, look, one treatment with a particular cancer has not worked, and therefore the doctors were wrong. That's not the case. The case is that the cancer or the disease itself is mutating. And that's the challenge that COVID-19 is presenting, and particularly the Delta variant, which, as we know, kind of came up in many ways through the second wave in India. So that's something I think that needs to be addressed, and it cannot be addressed by any country alone. And that's the other message, which is why these countries are coming together. And the US is very clear that it wants to have India become part of that world solution rather than the problem.
All right, on that note, Professor Sidhu, Mr. Sareen, and Ambassador Dayal, thank you once again for sharing your insights with our viewers here on Newsnight. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right, shifting focus to other stories we are tracking here on Newsnight tonight. Now, PM Modi held an interaction with representatives of religious and social organizations to discuss COVID-19 situation on Wednesday via a video conference. The PM said the interaction is yet another example of society and government working together for the benefit of the country. He appreciated the work done by these organizations towards meeting the challenges posed by COVID-19. He said the help provided to people was beyond caste or religious considerations and was a shining example of Ek Bharat, Ek Nisht Prayas. Across the country, temples, mosques, churches and gurudwaras doubled up as hospitals and isolation centers, while also helping the needy get food and medicines. The PM discussed the rapid rollout of vaccination drive in the country, adding that the Sabko Vaccine Muft vaccine campaign is like a shield in the fight against corona. He exhorted the religious and community leaders to join the efforts of the government by helping spread awareness about vaccination and help combat rumors or confusion about the vaccines. He asked them to work in collaboration with the government, especially in areas where there is high vaccine hesitancy. He said this will go a long way towards helping health workers reach out to each and every citizen. He also asked the leaders to be a part of the celebration of 75 years of independence. He asked them to ensure that everyone becomes a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. He said that on this occasion, we should work toward uniting the entire length and breadth of the nation through a Bharat Jodo Andolan and showcase the true spirit of Ek Bharat, Shresht Bharat. The leaders thanked the PM for organizing the interaction and lauded his decisive leadership in the fight against the pandemic. Right, and joining me is my colleague Arun Sharma. Arun, walk us through the main takeaways from that important meeting chaired by the Prime Minister.
Well, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in a series of interaction, we know this fact that during the COVID pandemic time, he has interacted with various groups, personalities, and today Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with some of the prominent religious leaders and, of course, the social organizations of our country. Now, the prominent takeaways are, of course, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly highlighted this fact that there is a great responsibility of these religious leaders and the social organizations. They have contributed a lot during the COVID pandemic time, and it is now the responsibility of these leaders only to ensure that there is an awareness as far as vaccination drive is concerned. So how can people be, made aware about the fact that they should come for the vaccination part? How can vaccination or the vaccine hesitancy can be removed? And in that context, Prime Minister Narendra Modi appealed all these leaders to ensure that there is no vaccine hesitancy and there is awareness as far as vaccination is concerned. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also appealed these religious leaders and the social organizations to that they should contribute as far as the Bharat Jodo Andolan is concerned, because India will be celebrating its 75th anniversary or primarily 75th independence primarily. So how can these leaders contribute as far as the Bharat Jodo Andolan is concerned, as far as Amrit Mahotsav of India is concerned? How can they play a crucial, a significant role? How can they come forward and ensure that people come forward, they contribute for the nation building part? So that was also appealed by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now unanimously all the religious leaders, all the social organization also lauded the efforts of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the way he has led from the front during the COVID pandemic time. So all these religious leaders appreciated Prime Minister Narendra Modi's efforts during the COVID pandemic time. So these are some of the big takeaways discussed and Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted. So the main highlight was the Bharat Jodo Andolan, number one. And number two, the COVID in this COVID pandemic time, how can vaccination drive be increased and how can these leaders play a significant role as far as removing the vaccine hesitancy from our society? Ramesh?
Right, thank you, Arun. That was my colleague Arun Sharma getting you all the latest on the Prime Minister's meeting with religious and social organizations. Right, moving on, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Wednesday addressed the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defence Ministers meeting in Dushanbe, Tajikistan. He said terrorism is the most serious threat to international peace and security. Any act of terror and support to such acts, including cross-border terrorism, committed by whomsoever, wherever and for whatever motives, is a crime against humanity. The minister reaffirmed India's resolve to fight terror in all forms and manifestations. He said India accords high priority to the consolidation of trust in the security domain within SCO, as well as strengthening ties with SCO partners bilaterally on the basis of equality, mutual respect and understanding. The challenge today is not just one of concepts and norms, but equally of their sincere practice. And stressing on the importance of the regional group, Minister pointed out that it is in the same spirit India helps people of Afghanistan, which is facing violence and devastation over decades. So far, India completed 500 projects in Afghanistan and continuing with some more, with total development aid of $3 billion. And now to all the news from Parliament. Now, Parliament witnessed multiple adjournments on Wednesday after the opposition created a ruckus for the 8th consecutive day. The Lok Sabha passed the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code A Bill 2021. The Rajya Sabha passed the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Amendment Bill 2021.
Ruckus continued for the 8th consecutive day of monsoon session of Parliament on Wednesday. The proceedings in both houses of Parliament were disrupted at regular intervals due to disturbance by opposition led by Congress. As a result, both houses saw multiple adjournments. Beginning with the Lok Sabha, the lower house witnessed little legislative business due to heavy uproar by opposition. The members tried to take up the question hour amid continuous sloganeering by opposition. The House witnessed repeated adjournments. TMC and Congress members rushed to the well of the House. They also tore and threw papers during proceedings in the lower house. Government strongly objected opposition's conduct in the House.
सरकार चर्चा के लिए तैयार है तो क्यों नहीं कर रहे? तो मैं यही कहना चाहता हूं, इनका काम केवल रुकावट पैदा करना है और केवल सदन में इस तरह के काम करना जिससे लोकतंत्र शर्मसार हो रहा है.
Amid sloganeering, the Lok Sabha passed the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Amendment Bill 2021 by voice vote. Meanwhile, BJP MP Nishikant Dubey demanded the removal of Congress leader Shashi Tharoor as the head of the Parliament Information Technology Panel. He also said he would not attend the meeting till Shashi Tharoor is removed from the position.
मेरा आपसे आग्रह है कि आर्टिकल 94 और 96 के खिलाफ आप शशि थरूर को इस कमेटी के चेयरमैन से निकालिए और क्योंकि हमने 17 लोगों ने साइन करके दिया है, जब तक उसका फैसला नहीं हो जाता तब तक इस कमेटी की मीटिंग नहीं हो.
Similar acrimonious scenes were visible in Upper House too. Opposition continued with shouting and sloganeering. Amid the din, the chair tried to run the question hour. However, the 0 hour could not be conducted. Amid shouting, Rajya Sabha passed Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Amendment Bill 2021.
बार बार भारत सरकार की प्रतिनिधि के नाते हमने अपील की कि देश के बच्चों के हितों को कम से कम सदन में ना बांटा जाए, बच्चे सुरक्षित हों, प्रदेश और जिला का प्रशासन सशक्त हो, इस कामना के साथ ये बिल लेकर आए.
In a written reply to the Rajya Sabha, the Ministry of Home Affairs said that the number of terrorist incidents in Jammu and Kashmir have reduced during 2020 by 59% as compared to 2019 and 32% up to June 2021 in comparison with corresponding period up to June 2020. In another written reply, the Home Ministry informed that the forthcoming census will be the first ever digital census in the country. On the other hand, opposition leaders held a meeting and also led a march in an effort to corner the government. They said that they would not back down on these matters. Questioning opposition's behavior, government and BJP said that the common man is suffering a huge loss due to opposition's attitude.
अगर इस तरीके से पार्लियामेंट चलता है, इससे स्पष्ट हो रही है कि आम जनता के लिए जो राहत दिलाने वाले बात हम ले आ रहे हैं, उससे विपक्ष को कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है. इतना बड़ा बैनर स्पीकर साहब के सामने उनके चेहरा ढकने के लिए भी कोशिश हो रही है. इसके ऊपर कोई चिंता नहीं.
राहुल जी अलग से जांच कराना चाहते हैं, उनके फोन के अंदर हथियार है, उसकी जांच कराना चाहते हैं तो सिंपल है बहुत. अपने फोन को फॉरेंसिक डिपार्टमेंट में दे दे, पुलिस में एफआईआर कराएं और कहें कि मेरे फोन में हथियार है. ये एफआईआर करते नहीं है.
Opposition continued with sloganeering both inside and outside the parliament. Despite assurances from the chair, inside the house, opposition is not letting Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha conduct any business, nor any constructive debate is being held on important bills. With inputs from Rishi, Neeraj, Shailendra Mishra, Anuj Yadav, Bureau Report, DD India.
Right, moving on now to our special segment on Parliament questions. Neeraj Dangi asked in the Rajya Sabha about government efforts for the uplift of transgenders. In his written reply, Minister of State for Social Justice and Empowerment, A. Narayanaswamy, listed legislative and welfare measures taken by the government. The transgender community faces societal discrimination, exclusion from family, absence of dignified livelihood and inadequate access to health, shelter and employment. Now, special shelter homes have been set up to make basic amenities such as food and healthcare, as also skill development to the transgender. Further, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 and the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Rules 2020 have been brought about to address issues of identity, protection of rights and welfare. A national portal of transgender persons has been set up to obtain identity certificates. A National Council for Transgender Persons was set up in August 2020 to advise the government on policy and legislation. In a written reply to Maluk Nagar's question in the Lok Sabha on reducing dependence on Chinese electronic items, Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, said the government has taken measures to boost domestic manufacture of electronic items. The government has taken several strategic steps and initiatives to expand the electronic system design and manufacturing in the country. It has launched a scheme for promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors, modified electronics manufacturing cluster scheme, production-linked incentive scheme, 100% foreign direct investment under automatic route for electronics manufacturing, and preference to Make in India Order 2017. The production-linked incentive scheme for large-scale electronics manufacturing was launched on 1st April 2020 and for IT hardware was notified on 3rd March 2021. The Electronics Development Fund was set up to provide risk capital to startups and companies developing new technologies. In other news, the Cabinet on Wednesday cleared the Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation Bill 2021. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman told journalists in New Delhi that the bill ensures all bank deposits such as saving, fixed deposit, current or recurring deposit. She said it covers all commercial, public and private sector banks and branches of foreign banks in India. The minister said bank deposits are insured up to a maximum of 500,000 rupees. That's about $6,700.
Union Cabinet on Wednesday cleared the Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation Bill 2021. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said each bank depositors to get up to maximum of 5 lakh rupees in each bank. The amendment to the DIC-GC Act 1961 had been announced in the Union Budget. An increase in insurance cover on bank deposit to rupees 5 lakh from rupees 1 lakh will be made effective in case a bank faces liquidation. The fresh amendments to the DIC-GC Act will provide huge relief to depositors in stressed banks. Under DIC-GC Bill 2021, 93.3% of all deposits will get covered, and in terms of deposit value, 50.9% deposit value will be covered. Global deposit value is only 80% of all deposit accounts. It only covers 20 to 30% of the deposit value. All bank deposits are included, such as saving, fixed deposit, current or recurring deposit.
In India, with the increase of insurance amount from 1 lakh rupee to 5 lakh rupees, is going to cover 98.3% of all deposit accounts. Because of this 5 lakh increase, 98.3% of all deposit accounts will get covered.
Apart from this, Cabinet clears Limited Liability Partnership Amendment Bill 2021, a lot of changes being made in Companies Act to decriminalize many sections and to improve ease of doing business for companies. Number of compoundable offence will be reduced from 22 to 7. Bill will be tabled in Parliament.
Total of 12 offences are to be decriminalized for LLPs. And then 3 sections are totally to be omitted, of which one is of course getting decriminalized also. Therefore, this set of amendments are one bringing for the LLPs a equal play field compared with the corporates, large corporates which come under the Companies Act.
The Cabinet has approved the agreement between IFSCA, IOSCO and IAIS to further secure the foreign investors. In another important decision, the 2 judicial members and 2 administrative posts were approved in the branches of CAT in Jammu and Kashmir.
जम्मू व श्रीनगर केंद्रीय प्रशासनिक अधिकरण कैट न्यायपीठों के लिए 2 न्यायिक सदस्य और 2 प्रशासनिक सदस्यों के प्रस्ताव को आज मंजूरी दी है। तो अनुच्छेद 370 के जाने के बाद जम्मू कश्मीर और लद्दाख के जो अधिकारी कर्मचारी हैं उनके लिए ये लाभ मिलेगा। इससे इन 2 पोस्ट को तय किया गया है जम्मू के लिए और श्रीनगर के लिए।
Union Cabinet on last week has approved a plan to establish a central university in Ladakh at a cost of rupees 750 crore. After the removal of Article 370, many decisions are being taken continuously for the development of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh region. With Shailendra Mishra, Bureau Report, DD India.
Basavaraj Bommai on Wednesday took oath as the new Chief Minister of Karnataka. The 61-year-old leader was administered the oath of office in secrecy by Governor Thawar Chand Gehlot at the Raj Bhavan in Bengaluru. The Karnataka BJP Legislature Party on Tuesday evening elected Bommai as its new leader to succeed outgoing Chief Minister B.S. Yeddyurappa.
Finally, Basavaraj Bommai took oath today as the new Chief Minister of Karnataka on Wednesday. Governor Thawarchand Gehlot administered the oath of office in secrecy to him at the Raj Bhavan. Former Chief Minister B.S. Yeddyurappa, Union Ministers Dharmendra Pradhan and G. Kishan Reddy and many other leaders were present at the swearing-in ceremony. Bommai, 61 years old, took the oath alone but said that he would soon expand the cabinet. Before taking charge, he also offered prayers at his new office. He later held a cabinet meeting and discussed various relevant issues with the officials. Bommai assured of an effective and honest government for the people and said that he will take everyone along.
मैं इस जिम्मेदारी को मैं एक हॉनेस्टली प्रामाणिक तौर से निभाने के लिए मेरा सर्वशक्ति इसमें लगाएंगे.
The Prime Minister congratulated Basavaraj Bommai on taking oath as Karnataka's new Chief Minister. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said, "Congratulations to Basavaraj Bommai on taking oath as Karnataka's CM. He brings with him rich legislative and administrative experience. I am confident he will build on the exceptional work done by our government in the state. Best wishes for a fruitful tenure." The BJP's legislative party in Karnataka elected Bommai as its new leader Tuesday evening. Basavaraj Bommai is the son of the former Chief Minister late S.R. Bommai and is a leader of the Lingayat community from North Karnataka. He previously held the portfolio of the Minister of Home Affairs, Law, Parliamentary Affairs and Legislative Affairs in the Yeddyurappa government. Bommai is the three-time MLA from Shigaon in Haveri district and has been a councillor twice. He joined the BJP in 2008. B.S. Yeddyurappa had resigned on Monday, putting an end to months of speculation over his removal from the post of Chief Minister. He resigned on a day his government completed 2 years. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has praised former CM B.S. Yeddyurappa. PM tweeted, "No words will ever do justice to the monumental contribution of Shri B.S. Yeddyurappa towards our party and for Karnataka's growth. For decades, he toiled hard, travelled across all parts of Karnataka and struck a chord with people. He is admired for his commitment to social welfare." Yeddyurappa is a veteran leader of the BJP in Karnataka and has played the most important role in government formation for BJP in the south. With Aisha Khanum from Bangalore, Bureau Report, DD India.
Right, moving on, the National Education Policy 2020 is a guiding philosophy for changing the learning landscape, making education holistic and building strong foundations for a self-reliant India. Upon the completion of 1 year of NEP 2020, PM Modi will launch an array of initiatives aimed at realizing the goals of NEP 2020.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to address policymakers in the domain of education and skill development on Thursday. The event will mark the completion of 1 year of reforms under the National Education Policy 2020. The Prime Minister will also launch multiple initiatives in the education sector in the presence of students and teachers from across the country. This is the first education policy of the 21st century and replaces the 34-year-old National Policy on Education 1986. The Prime Minister will launch the Academic Bank of Credit that will provide multiple entry and exit options for students in higher education. First-year engineering programs in regional languages and guidelines for internationalization of higher education. The initiatives to be launched also include Vidya Pravesh, a 3-month play-based school preparation module for grade 1 students, Indian Sign Language as a subject at secondary level, Nishtha 2.0, an integrated program of teacher training designed by NCERT, Safal or structured assessment for analyzing learning levels, a competency-based assessment framework for grades 3, 5 and 8 in CBSE schools, and a website dedicated to artificial intelligence. Further, the event will witness the launch of National Digital Education Architecture or NDEAR and National Education Technology Forum or NETF. These initiatives will mark a significant step towards realization of the goals of the National Education Policy 2020 and will make the education sector more vibrant and accessible. Built on the foundational pillars of access, equity, quality, affordability and accountability, This policy is aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. NEP 2020 also aims to transform India into a vibrant knowledge society and global knowledge superpower by making both school and college education more holistic, flexible, multidisciplinary, suited to 21st century needs and aimed at bringing out the unique capabilities of each student. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, let's now get you all the news from the Tokyo Olympics. And Day 5 brought mixed results for Team India at the Tokyo Olympics. Take a look at this report to know who all sailed through and who performed to their best at the ongoing Tokyo Olympics.
India was in action today in 6 different events at the ongoing Tokyo Olympics. The Indian contingent represented the country in the sport of women's hockey, archery, badminton, boxing, sailing and rowing. Day 5 also marked a mixed result for the nation. Let's start with ones who progressed for further rounds. In boxing, India's Pooja Rani enters quarterfinals in Tokyo Olympics, followed by Lovlina Borgohain and MC Mary Kom. Pooja Rani beat Algeria's Ishraq Chaib by 5-0 in women's 69-75 kilos round of 16 event. With a dominating performance by female pugilist, boxing currently stands at a stronger position in the ongoing Tokyo Olympics. Whereas in archery, Deepika Kumari beat USA's Jennifer Messino Fernandez in women's individual 16 eliminations. Earlier, she defeated Bhutan's Karma by 6-0 in 32 elimination round. And in badminton, star shuttler PV Sindhu defeated Hong Kong's Nang Yi Chung in her second Group J match of the Tokyo Olympics. Sindhu defeated Nang Yi Chung in straight sets 21-9, 21-16 to cruise into the elimination round of women's singles. Sindhu will play round of 16 against Mia Lichfeld on 29th July. Well, those were the winners of the day, but out of 6 events that were played today, there were many upsets as well. In men's singles archery event, Praveen Jadhav bowed out, losing to USA's world number 1 Brady Ellison by 6-0 after beating world number 2. In rowing, India's Arjun Lal and Arvind Singh finished last in men's lightweight double scull semi-final. The Indian duo will compete in Final B on Thursday to determine their ranking at the Tokyo Olympics. In hockey today, the Indian women's hockey team lost by 1-4 to defending champions Great Britain, marking 3rd consecutive defeat at the Olympics. For India, Sharmila Devi scored the lone goal in the 23rd minute. The Indians need at least a point from this game to be safe, but they now will have to win their remaining 2 matches to have any chance of qualifying for the knockout stage. India will next play Ireland on Friday. In badminton, Sai Praneeth went down to Mark Caligiuri, world number 29 by 14-21, 14-21 in second group match. Sai finished last in the group, marking an end to his Tokyo 2020 campaign. In archery, India's veteran archer Tarundeep Rai crashed out of men's individual recurve event after losing a thriller in round of 32. Tarundeep was outclassed 5-6 by rookie Aite Shani of Israel in a hard-fought match. And in sailing, Varun Thakkar and KC Ganapathy finished 19th in race 4 in men's skiff 49er. After finishing 18th in the first 2 races, the pair bettered their performance to finish 17th in race 3, but in race 4 they fell off by 2 places. The Indian contingent represented the country in 6 different events today and produced a mixed result on day 5. However, medal chances for the country are still bright as men's hockey, wrestling and badminton are potential contenders in the race of Tokyo 2020 medals. Sports Desk, DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.